I'm Ethan Caldwell, retired Marine sniper, widower, father to Sophie, my disabled daughter. This is our fight against a monster. 6 years ago, my wife Laura died of cancer, leaving me to raise Sophie alone. Sophie, now 11, has spinal muscular atrophy and uses a wheelchair, but her wit and warmth could melt steel. We moved to Greenhaven Estates, a suburban community in central Ohio, hoping for peace and accessibility. As a retired Marine sniper, I'd left my rifle behind, confiscated by law after my service taking a security consultant job to stay near Sophie. Greenhaven's quiet streets and community garden promised a sanctuary, but I didn't anticipate the wrath of Patricia Pat Larson, the HOA president who turned our refuge into a war zone. Greenhaven was pitched as a neighborly haven, but Pat, a 58-year-old former HR manager with a perm and a dictator streak, ran it like her personal kingdom. Her HOA rules were draconian. No unsightly planters, no kids' bikes on driveways, even bans on certain curtain colors. Her standards were a power grab, enforced with fines and intimidation. I dismissed her early emails about my fence being non-regulation. Sophie's care medications therapy was my priority, not Pat's petty decrees. But her obsession soon targeted us, starting with venomous jabs that grew into a campaign of cruelty. It started at a Labor Day block party. Sophie and I rolled up her wheelchair decked with sunflowers she'd painted. Neighbors greeted us kids trading Pokemon cards with Sophie, who beamed in her yellow dress. Pat, perched by the dessert table, watched with a scowl. As I pushed Sophie to grab a cupcake, Pat swooped in her tone, sickly sweet. Ethan, Sophie's charming, but that chair's a bit intrusive for gatherings. Maybe a smaller model next time. I clenched my fists, keeping my voice steady. Her wheelchair's her mobility, Pat. She's perfect as is, she huffed and left, but her eyes promised trouble. Pat's attacks sharpened through the fall. She issued citations for excessive noise when Sophie's occupational therapist visited, claiming the equipment disturbed the peace. She called our accessibility ramp a property devaluer, despite its county approval. Neighbors whispered about her vendetta, but stayed silent, fearing her clout. Pat's HOA board, a loyal cadre of sycophants, greenlit her every move. She'd find a family who stole her $200 for an unapproved mailbox and threatened to lien another's home over a bird feeder. I tried to stay civil, but my patience was thinning. The real battle began in spring when Sophie fell in love with our backyard garden. She'd roll out to tend her daisies, her hands steady despite her condition. The garden with its raised beds I'd built for her was her haven, but Pat saw it as a violation. One April afternoon, as Sophie watered her plants, Pat stormed into our yard, clipboard in hand. "Ethan, this garden's an eyesore." She barked loud enough for neighbors to hear. "It's not HOA approved." I stepped outside, towering over her. "It's on my property, Pat, and it's for Sophie. Back off." She left, but I knew she was scheming. By summer, Pat's war escalated. She posted signs around Greenhaven, no mobility devices in common areas for safety and appearance. It was a direct hit at Sophie. At the HOA meeting, I called her out. "This violates the ADA, Pat. You're targeting my daughter." She smirked, leaning back. "Ethan, the HOA protects property values. If you don't like it, move." Gasps filled the room. A few neighbors nodded with her, but others shifted uncomfortably. I stormed out, contacting a lawyer friend, Mark, who confirmed the signs were illegal. Legal action would take time, and Pat was counting on it. Tensions boiled into July. Pat's allies ostracized us. Someone slashed our garden hoses, and I reported it as vandalism, but no witnesses surfaced. Sophie sensed the hostility, asking, "Why's Pat so mean?" "Daddy," I hugged her, hiding my fury. "She's afraid of your light, Soph. We'll show her." Pat's arrogance is swelled. She posted on social media about elevating Greenhaven's prestige. Her photos showcasing a lifeless suburb. She fined kids for sidewalk chalk, calling it graffiti. The community was suffocating, but I stood firm. The garden became our battleground. Pat patrolled daily, citing neighbors for minor infractions, a stray soccer ball, an unpruned bush. Sophie still tended her daisies, so I stayed vigilant, refusing to let Pat intimidate her. Each visit to the garden was a standoff. Pat would lurk, muttering about violations while I watched Sophie. My sniper's instincts sharp, despite my disarmed status. Some neighbors offered quiet support. Others echoed Pat's rules or rules mantra. I overheard her call Sophie a nuisance at a picnic. My blood boiled, but I held back for Sophie's sake. On a humid August evening, everything exploded. The neighborhood was quiet, most families at a county fair. Sophie wanted to water her daisies before dusk, so we went to the backyard, her wheelchair gliding over the path I'd leveled. I sat nearby checking emails when Pat appeared uninvited, a pellet gun in her hands, likely for pest control. She'd later claim her eyes locked on Sophie Ethan. That chair's ruining the aesthetic, she yelled, her voice carrying over the fence I stood. Get off my property, Pat. She ignored me, raising the gun. I'm done with this. Before I could react, she fired. A pellet struck Sophie's arm and she screamed, dropping her watering can. Another hit her chest. I lunged, shouting Sophie as she clutched her arm, tears streaming. Pat, wild-eyed, fired again, the pellet grazing Sophie's shoulder. Neighbors, drawn by the noise, peered over fences, gasping. I reached Sophie, shielding her, my voice lethal. Drop it, Pat. She froze, the gun shaking in her hands. A neighbor. Mr. Jenkins filmed it, all the video, later going viral. I scooped Sophie up, rushing her inside, my heart racing. She was hurt, terrified, but alive. I called 911, cradling Sophie as she sobbed. Daddy, why'd she shoot me? I had no answer, only rage and guilt. Paramedics arrived, treating Sophie's welts and bruises, confirming no critical injuries, but urging a hospital visit. As they worked, I faced Pat, who stood defiant in my yard. You're finished, I said, pulling my old Marine ID from my wallet. My only badge now, I'm a retired sniper, Pat. You just assaulted my daughter. Her face blanched. You're... What? She stammered. Police arrived and I handed her over, my voice steady. Arrest her for assault and child endangerment. Neighbors cheered as she was cuffed, her reign crumbling. The backyard was a blur of flashing lights and shouting voices as police hauled Pat away. Her protest drowned out by the sirens. Her face, once smug, was now a mask of panic, her wrists straining against the cuffs. This is a misunderstanding, she yelled, but the neighbors clustered at their fences, weren't buying it. Sophie, still trembling in my arms, winced as paramedics bandaged her arm. The red welts from the pellets stark against her pale skin. I held her close, whispering, You're safe now, Soph. Her small, shaky nod tore at my heart. This wasn't just an attack. It was the spark that would burn Pat's tyranny to the ground. Paramedics insisted on taking Sophie to the hospital for a full checkup, and I rode with her, my Marine-honed calm masking the storm inside. Her injuries, bruises, welts, and a minor abrasion on her shoulder were thankfully not life-threatening. But the emotional toll was another story. Dr. Ellis, the ER pediatrician, warned of potential trauma. She's tough, but this could linger, he said. I nodded, guilt gnawing at me. I'd trained to spot threats from miles away, yet I'd missed the monster in my own backyard. As Sophie dozed, I called Mark, my lawyer friend, who was already reviewing the viral video Mr. Jenkins had posted on X. This is airtight. Mark said, Pat's done. The video spread like wildfire, racking up millions of views by midnight. It was raw and devastating. Pat's furious glare. The pellet gun's pop. Sophie's screams as she clutched her arm. Comments flooded X branding. Pat a villain and Sophie a warrior. Greenhaven. Karen trended with users demanding justice. Local news vans parked outside our house, but I waved them off, focusing on Sophie. She slept fitfully in her hospital bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I stayed by her side, replaying the moment I failed to shield her. My sniper instincts, dulled by civilian life, hadn't been enough. Back home the next day, I settled Sophie in her room, her wheelchair parked by her bed. She was quiet, her usual spark dimmed. Daddy, will Pat come back? She asked, her voice small. I knelt beside her. Not to hurt you, Soph, I swear it. After she napped, I checked my phone. Neighbors had left flowers and cards on our porch, some apologizing for not challenging Pat sooner. Mr. Jenkins stopped by, his face grim. We let her rule too long, he said. No more. I thanked him, sensing a shift. Greenhaven was rising, and Pat's actions had lit the fuse. I filed charges against Pat, aggravated assault, child endangerment, reckless endangerment, and disability-based harassment under ADA violations. Mark dove into the case, warning that Pat's connections, local business owners, and a few HOA cronies might muddy the waters. She'll play the victim, he said, but that video's a slam dunk. I also reported the HOA's discriminatory signs to the Department of Justice's ADA division, which opened an investigation. The no mobility devices signs were torn down by evening, but the scars remained. Sophie's garden was trampled, her daisies crushed under Pat's boots. I vowed to rebuild it and her trust. Pat's first court appearance was a circus. She arrived in a pressed suit, her lawyer spinning a tale of self-defense and property rights. Pat claimed she'd only fired to scare Sophie, believing the wheelchair encroached on community space. The lie was laughable, and the video played in court crushed her story. Sophie's cries echoed and Pat's composure cracked. Judge Monroe, a grizzled former prosecutor, set a steep bail citing the malicious act. Pat's allies paid it, but her world was collapsing. Her social media accounts, once filled with boasts about Greenhaven's perfection, were deleted amid public outrage. Greenhaven's reaction was electric. At an emergency HOA meeting, residents packed the community center, their fury palpable. I attended Sophie at home with a trusted sitter, her welts a constant reminder of why I was there. Mr. Jenkins took the mic, his voice shaking. Pat terrorized us, fines, threats, now shooting a child. We're through. The room erupted. A quiet widow, Mrs. Kim, shared how Pat had fined her $900 for a non-compliant porch swing, forcing her to skip medication. Stories poured out. Families bullied kids, silenced gardens destroyed. The HOA board cornered, suspended Pat, and announced elections. But the crowd wanted blood. Pat's loyalists fought back. A few neighbors, wedded to her standards, posted on X that Sophie's garden provoked the incident, claiming wheelchairs disrupted Greenhaven's look. One wrote Caldwell's exaggerating to ruin Pat. The backlash was ferocious. X-users shredded them and the post vanished. But the division stung. Sophie overheard a kid at the park whisper, "Her dad's causing drama." She came home subdued, asking, "Am I trouble, Daddy?" I hugged her tight. "You're a gift, Sofa." They're learning. I swore to shield her from the noise while dismantling Pat's legacy. The community began to rally. Mrs. Kim organized a Grow for Sophie event, replanting our garden with donated flowers. Families showed up, kids helping Sophie water new daisies from her wheelchair, her smile flickering back. A new garden sign read, "Sophie's Sanctuary," but Pat's shadow loomed. Her lawyer filed motions to dismiss, arguing lack of intent and media bias. Mark countered with statements from Mr. Jenkins, the teen gardener, and others who'd seen Pat's months-long harassment. The case was rock solid, but Pat's defiance tested my restraint. By fall, the trial loomed and Greenhaven was transforming. The HOA elections ousted Pat's board, electing Mrs. Kim and Mr. Jenkins, who prioritized inclusivity. They installed a wheelchair-accessible garden bed funded by donations. Neighbors defied Pat's rules. Vibrant flower beds sprouted kids, drew chalk murals, and a family hung a tire swing. Pat's sterile vision was dead, replaced by life. But Sophie struggled. Nightmares of the gun haunted her, and she flinched at sudden sounds. Her therapist, Dr. Reyes, helped her process, but I blame myself. I should have stopped Pat earlier. The trial began in October, a media frenzy. Reporters camped outside the courthouse and X buzzed with updates. Pat testified, her voice trembling, claiming she'd panicked and never meant harm. Her lawyer painted her as a dedicated steward, undone by a misstep. Mark tore it apart, presenting Pat's text to her board, calling Sophie a problem and plotting to force Caldwell out. The video played again. Sophie's scream silencing the room. The teen gardener Liam testified about Pat's relentless bullying. His voice firm. Mr. Jenkins recounted the hoe's vandalism, linking it to Pat's allies. The jury's faces hardened. Pat's defense called her cronies who mumbled about community aesthetics, but their words rang hollow. Mark's closing argument was a gut punch. Patricia Larson didn't just shoot Sophie, she shot at our values, targeting a child for being different. Justice demands accountability. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts: aggravated assault, child endangerment, reckless endangerment, and harassment. Pat's face crumpled. Judge Monroe sentenced her to 3 years in prison, $20,000 in restitution, and mandatory ADA training. The courtroom roared, and I exhaled, relief flooding me. Greenhaven exhaled too. Pat's imprisonment ended her reign, and her house sold to a family who planted a rainbow garden. The DOJ's investigation fined the HOA $75,000, redirecting funds to accessibility upgrades. Sophie's new wheelchair with Daisy decals arrived and she named it Sunshine. She tested it in the garden, rolling to her daisies as Liam watered nearby. Her laughter returning, I watched my throat tight, knowing she was reclaiming her joy. The guilty verdict was a thunderclap shattering Pat's grip on Greenhaven and igniting a spark of renewal. As snow-dusted central Ohio blanketing our garden in white, I poured my energy into Sophie's healing her body and her heart and into nurturing the community's awakening. Pat's 3-year sentence stripped her of power, her allies slinking into silence, their influence buried under the weight of her crimes. Her old house, now home to a young couple with a toddler, bloomed with wildflowers, a quiet rebellion against her sterile rules. But scars lingered, Sophie's welts had faded, but her trust was fragile, and I wrestled with the guilt of not stopping Pat sooner. Yet Sophie's daily courage, her sly grin, her stubborn joy, kept me grounded. Greenhaven was reborn. Mrs. Kim and Mr. Jenkins, the new HOA leaders, launched a Greenhaven Grows program, hosting workshops on disability inclusion and community strength. The garden's accessible beds built for Sophie became a gathering spot for all kids. Planted seeds, a veteran with a cane, tended herbs, and an elderly neighbor rolled her walker to join Sophie's wheelchair. Now a symbol of resilience was a fixture. Kids taping glow sticks to its wheels during evening picnics. At a winter solstice event, Sophie lit a community bonfire, her face glowing in the flames. Neighbors cheered, and I saw pride in her eyes, a light Pat couldn't dim. Not everyone embraced the shift. A few of Pat's holdouts, led by a gruff retiree named Carl, muttered about the overzealous changes, claiming the garden's ramps clashed with Greenhaven's aesthetic. Carl posted on X, "This HOA's pandering, wasting dues on one girl." The response was fierce. Residents flooded his post with photos of Sophie tending daisies, captioned, "This is home," Carl's son, embarrassed, pulled him to a community meeting to apologize. We followed Pat out. Of fear, he admitted. I nodded, understanding their silence, but relieved they were evolving. Greenhaven's transformation was uneven, but it was real. Sophie's therapy with Dr. Reyes was a lifeline. She drew the shooting, her crayons turning the pellet gun into a dragon, spitting fire. Dr. Reyes helped her recast herself as a knight, slaying the beast. One session, Sophie brought home a drawing of herself in her wheelchair, a sword raised labeled Knight Sophie. I framed it above her desk next to her daisy sketches. "I'm not scared anymore," she said, her voice firm. Her nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of gardening and friends. I marveled at her strength, knowing she was reshaping my world as much as Greenhaven's. Legally, Pat's case wasn't closed. She appealed her conviction, claiming the viral video's publicity biased the jury. Mark, our lawyer, was unfazed, filing a civil suit for Sophie's medical bills and emotional distress. The appeal dragged into spring, but Pat's chances were slim. The video, texts, and testimonies were a fortress. The DOJ's investigation concluded mandating annual ADA audits for the HOA. The $75,000 fine funded a wheelchair-accessible park pavilion, with Sophie choosing the paint color sunflower yellow. At the opening, she rolled out, first grinning, for the local paper. The headline read, "Sophie Caldwell plants Greenhaven's future." Pat's prison stint seemed to rattle her, at least on the surface. 10 months in, she sent a letter to Sophie and me, her handwriting shaky. She apologized, claiming her obsession with order had blinded her to humanity. She mentioned her ADA training, saying it opened her mind. I read it with a sniper's skepticism, unsure if it was genuine or a parole play. Sophie, wiser than her years, shrugged. "She can say sorry, Daddy, but I don't need her to like me." I hugged her, awed by her clarity. I didn't respond to Pat. Her words couldn't undo Sophie's pain, and our focus was on thriving. Greenhaven's revival spread beyond Sophie families, silenced by Pat's fines, a single dad harassed for his son's skateboard ramp. A couple scolded for their gaudy wind chimes found their voices. The Greenhaven Grows program expanded, hosting potlucks where neighbors shared stories of Pat's overreach. One night, a teen boy admitted Pat had fined his family for a loud guitar practice, forcing them to pawn his instrument. The room rallied, and by morning, yards sprouted signs, "Bloom free." Pat's monochrome world was gone, replaced by a tapestry of color and courage. My role as a security consultant took on new meaning. I'd once aimed rifles at distant threats, But now I aim for change training, local businesses on accessibility, and speaking at county meetings about inclusive spaces. Colleagues called me Sniper Dad, and I owned it, bringing Sophie to community safety fairs. She handed out daisy stickers explaining how gardens make everyone happy. When the township approved an accessible rec center, Sophie unveiled the plaque, her wheelchair gleaming. "This is for all of us," she said. And I choked up. She was rewriting Greenhaven's heart. By summer, a year after the shooting, the garden was a riot of life. Kids planted marigolds, parents shared harvests, and the pavilion hosted movie nights. Sophie, her welts long healed, gardened daily, Liam helping her prune. He'd started a youth gardening club inspired by Sophie's grit. At a community barbecue, Mrs. Kim unveiled a mural on the pavilion. A girl in a wheelchair, daisies in her lap, surrounded by friends. Sophie gasped, whispering, "That's me, Daddy." The crowd clapped and I fought tears. This was the Greenhaven I'd fought for, a place where Sophie soared. Pat's release came quietly in the fall after 20 months with good behavior. She moved to a small apartment across town, her HR career dead. A neighbor spotted her at a grocery store looking older, quieter. I didn't revel in her fall. Her punishment was losing the control she'd craved. On X, a few diehards mourned her standards, but most posts celebrated Greenhaven's rebirth. One read, "From Greenhaven, Karen to Dirt Greenhaven, grows thank you, Sophie." I showed it to Sophie and she grinned. "I'm famous, Daddy." Sophie's 12th birthday was a garden extravaganza planned by her gardening club. The pavilion was decked with sunflowers, and a cake shaped like a daisy sat on a picnic table. Liam led a seed planting game, and kids took turns in the accessible beds, calling them Sophie's Kingdom. Mr. Jenkins gave a toast, his voice thick. Sophie and Ethan showed us what strength is. "Here's to them and to us." Cheers rang out. Sophie, in a sunflower dress, raised her juice cup. "To Greenhaven," she shouted. I joined in, my heart full. This was her triumph. The party stretched into dusk, fireflies dancing over the garden. Sophie rolled to me, her eyes bright. "Daddy, I love it here." I knelt, hugging her. "You made it worth loving, Soph." She laughed, then zoomed off to join her friends. I watched the weight of the past year lifting. Pat's cruelty had wounded us, but Sophie's spirit had healed us. Greenhaven wasn't just a suburb. It was a promise kept by a girl who turned pain into purpose. As winter approached, I took Sophie to Laura's grave, our yearly ritual. She placed a daisy on the headstone, whispering, "Mom, we're happy." I told Laura about Sophie's victory. The gardens bloom. The wind felt like her smile. Back home, Sophie showed me a new drawing. Night Sophie galloping through a garden, neighbors waving. "This is us," she said. I hung it by her first sketch, knowing our story was still growing, rooted in struggle, flowering with love. Greenhaven kept evolving. The HOA won a state award for inclusivity, and Sophie spoke at the ceremony, her voice clear. She rolled out in a cape Liam sewed, grinning for photos. I stood back, my Marine pride in her boundless. Pat was a ghost, her tyranny replaced by a community that saw Sophie's light. As spring loomed, Sophie planned a garden festival, insisting on accessible paths. "Everyone grows," she said. I laughed, agreeing. She'd taught me that joy was the fiercest rebellion. Years later, the shooting was a crucible that forged us. Sophie grew into an advocate, studying environmental law to protect community spaces. Greenhaven remained her home, its gardens etched with her courage. Pat faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale. But Sophie, she was a legend, her wheelchair, a chariot of change. And me, I was her dad, forever grateful for the girl who transformed a town, and my soul with her unbreakable heart.